Leaders will need to raise the bar on standardization and documentation because the current reality in many plants, the procedures exist, but the real work really lives in the people's minds. And a humanoid-driven operation can't rely on undocumented know-how. So the work has to be translated into data, the steps should be clear, the decision rules should be clear.
You're listening to Food Tech Talk, Supply Chain Insights from Farm to Fork, a podcast discussing the latest trends and technologies in the food and supplements industries, brought to you by Trustwell, featuring conversations with regulatory experts, quality and safety champions, and thought leaders across the industry. I'm your host, Katy Jones, CEO at Trustwell. If you're loving the conversation, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned to the end of the episode, where you'll hear our guests tell us their key food industry predictions for the next 12 months. All right, let's jump right in. On today's episode of Food Tech Talk, Supply Chain Insights from Farm to Fork, we're delighted to welcome Ozan Ozaskinli, partner and managing director at Value Gene Consulting Group. With over 2 decades of experience helping food manufacturers and distributors turn complexity into measurable results, Ozan works at the intersection of food safety, operations, and emerging technology. His perspective bridges long-term industry shifts like AI, automation, climate pressure, and workforce change with the near-term decisions that leaders must make to protect food safety, resilience, and performance. Welcome to the podcast, Ozan.
Thank you very much for having me, Katy. Thank you.
So we'll get started. I love asking this question around how people get into the food industry in general. But for you, what moment in your career first made you realize that food safety isn't just a technical issue, but really an issue that involves leadership and systems as well?
I've been working in food industry more than a decade right now, and I genuinely enjoy the food industry because it's deeply cultural, but also very dynamic and fast changing. I think that part really was very clear on the food safety part. I remember one moment that in a particular plant, we were there to improve the overall manufacturing efficiency. And there were a baking line that the teams were working on. And there were a lot of complaints and the quality related waste issues in that line. And the teams were adding more screens, more metal detectors to increase the controls. But what we can see is, like, in those cases, you don't need more controls. The problem is not the food safety itself. It's really the operational excellence that you are missing in that particular line. And the line is not stable. There are handover issues. What needs to held, rework is not very clear. In those cases, it's not really the standalone food safety control will change the solution. It's really the system itself. And what I also see that, like, where the leaders comes in, especially the situations that you need to ask the right questions. In day-to-day operations, there's a lot of pressure on the operators, on the supervisors to deliver the products. And the goal is really delivering the target output. So they don't typically have enough time to think about what's really happening, why is this really happening? And then that's the part that the leaders comes in. What I see is the best leaders are the ones that really slow down the team and then help them to think about why is this happening, rather than just quickly trying to fix the problem itself. And when the leaders don't do that, what I also see is what's happening. The teams are adding more controls, more checks, more paperwork, eventually makes the process even harder to run on a day-to-day basis. So that's the part that really leaders contribute to those solutions.
In your bio, you write that, your work sits at the intersection of, food manufacturing and emerging technology, and you reference AI, and you also reference humanoid robotics. For those that may not have heard that term, I think everybody's heard AI, unless you're, a complete hermit. But when you talk about humanoid robotics, how do you define that?
Humanoid, that's a very good question because there is a lot of different perspectives about the robots. And what we are really defining as humanoid robots are the robots that can do the exact things that a human can do. We are not talking about here super robots that can carry like 500 pounds of bags. So we are really talking about human grade robots that can work on the industries like a human being. I think that definition is important and like we really set the understanding for everyone.
If you're enjoying this episode, be sure to check out the Reconnect On Demand library. Every October, Trustwell brings together food industry professionals, partners, and customers for Reconnect. Our annual event focused on sharing best practices, exploring emerging technology, and building stronger supply chains. Now, the full library of sessions is available on demand, from expert panels to product deep dives and industry success stories. There's something for everyone working to improve food safety, transparency, and efficiency. Head to trustwell.com/reconnect to gain access to all of this year's sessions. Now, back to the show. You started touching on this topic earlier around the how food safety and regulatory compliance, where you see it break down. And so you saw that breakdown, and that's when you saw that, hey, there's an opportunity here, more than just the technology, but also leadership and the systems that support it. How, as you work with food companies that are navigating constant disruption, right, whether it be climate change or tariffs or a variety of things happening, in the industry right now, where do you see food safety and regulatory compliance most often break down during these, transformation initiatives?
The breakdown usually happens at the intersection of speed and the compliance. This is what I see in many years. So there is many times a lot of pressure to deliver fast results, whether if it's a new investment, new product, new materials. So then in those cases, when the teams treat food safety or regulatory as a late stage checkpoint instead of design input, there where the problem starts. In those cases, I've seen examples that the incorrect labels reach in the market because the checks were really at the late stage and the packages are produced and really it's about to go to the market. So I think that's the biggest challenge. We always have the tendency to see food safety and regulatory as the drivers that can slow down the process, but in reality, it doesn't have to be.
We see that quite a bit, mostly on the new customers coming on and really a breakdown in the supplier level data, right? And that's where it breaks down, where we see a lot of those issues with the majority of mislabeling coming from allergen issues mainly. So yes. So from your work, what separates the food manufacturers that really embed food safety into their operations from those that treat it more as a parallel function or something? I've referred to food safety. Unfortunately, food safety can be seen as kind of the wet blanket of the organization there, with the requirements, but it's such an important part of every step in manufacturing. And so from your perspective, what separates those that really embed it versus look at it as a parallel function?
Two things really stand out for me. The first one is the companies that really does this well are the ones that has really strong cross-functional muscles. They don't pull in quality or regulatory just at the very end, but they bring together in the early stage. And then they also invest in their teams to understand different part of the business. So, in one of my clients, our client has developed a team that has really both good understanding, food safety, regulatory, and operations at the same time. And they were sitting in the middle of driving the all major commercialization projects because they know different perspectives, they understand different requirements, and they know that all of them matter to really make the product commercially viable and ready for the market. So those muscles are quite rare. So it's not like in especially we see a lot that the quality organizations, regulatory organizations are like separate and only answer the questions when it asks. But the ones that are really successful, like the ones that really brings them as a single team. And the second one is the data quality. I think this is an area that you work a lot. A lot of organizations lose time because they spend half of the meeting just debating what is the data, what is the truth, where can we reach this constraint, how we can find that information. I think it's really not only results a waste of time, but also demotivates the people as well. When it becomes really a big hurdle for people to make simple decisions, they try to also think about shortcuts or easier solutions in some cases. That's why I think the data transparency, data visibility is one of the biggest differentiators here.
You talked about describing humanoids as really enabling that asset-based continuity rather than that labor-dependent continuity. So can you talk a little bit about that? How does that really change how plants can think about reliability and throughput?
Labor gap is really one of the biggest challenges in the food manufacturing. Based on their latest reports, the turnover was around like 30% on the average. The workforce that the companies have are aging. They are getting close to retirement, and it's getting harder to find staff that can work at night, on the weekend. So it's really getting harder. And what we also see that due to these, many plants don't really run consistently across the shifts, different days, because they have different capabilities, different people in their plant. There is a human factor in it. And really, like we see like 30%, 40% performance differences from one shift to another with the same machine, same product, same line, and then it changed with the people. I think this is where the humanoids come in. So really humanoids change the continuity model on this one. They really first will close the labor gap because many companies are also not running at their top performance level and the capacity due to labor issues. They cannot simply find staff to work on the lines. So first it will address that, but then secondly, and even more importantly, it will reduce the operational variability. So that's biggest the challenge and the biggest part of the inefficiency. And I think this will help companies to think through how then should they redesign their systems, their processes, rather than how they can find some people on the shift. So rather than thinking about who should be on the shift, who do we need, they will start to spend more time on the processes, on the systems, so that can get really better at that.
In that high amount of variability, you said anywhere, 30% plus that turnover. So what operational problems are the, robotics and the humanoids uniquely positioned to then absorb that traditional, like just sheer automation cannot?
I think there are two main reasons. One of them is the flexibility, and the other one is really faster implementation. What I mean by flexibility is in food manufacturing world, it's really completely different from an automotive factory. So we see many robots, humanoids these days, like placed in the automotive, but in food world, the products are getting more complicated. Ingredients are changing constantly. Batch sizes are decreasing because we have more products in the market. The changeovers are increasing. So these are not the things that is easy to manage with the traditional automation, because you have every time different requirements, different needs. The advantage with the humanoids is they are designed to work in the same environments that we work, and they are more flexible compared to a single machine that you bring to the floor. That's the beauty of it. Of course you need to train, of course you need to invest in the humanoid, but eventually they are designed to manage the complexity, and this brings a lot of flexibility compared to traditional automation. And the second one is the faster implementation. So in a traditional automation, you need to take the time, invest in money, the engineering, procurement, installation, commissioning. These are the things that typically takes 6 to 12 months, and then you still see any results. With the humanists, the biggest advantage is you can simply test and see what are the benefits that you are getting immediately. So when you have the right resources, the number of right robots, you can just simply try to see whether you can improve with the existing fleet that you have. I think that's the biggest beauty of it. You will be much faster in implementation.
You kind of addressed this in that last comment, but expanding on that a little bit. So from an economic standpoint, where do the humanoids create value first in food manufacturing? So is it in reclaiming yield that's lost perhaps with a fully human line? Is it stabilizing OEE, or is it reducing that operational fragility with that high turnover and other elements? So from your perspective, where is that first value seen in rolling out the humanoids?
The first benefit will come with closing the labor gap, but it's just a starting point. So it's really the starting point, and it will be addressed very quickly. The real benefit is, we also discussed before, the operational variability. So this will really significantly reduce, and this is a great advantage. And then over time, with the especially fleet learning, with adding more training to the humanoids, we will start to see an improvement in the OEEs, efficiencies as well. But I think this is also important to highlight the expectations from the humanoids. So there are two main components in a food manufacturing process. The one of them is the handling, and the other one is what's happening on the lines, on the machines. So here the expectations from the humanities is improving this handling process. The line management itself will be still done by the machines, by the AI. So I think here the responsibility is not on the humanities, it's on the AI, because it's simply replacing a machine operator with a humanoid doesn't add too much value. So the real difference here is bringing AI to the line, and then really improving the line when it's running. So in the future, the future of the line, the production line, food manufacturing line, will run by humanoids on the handling side, but with the AI when it comes to really managing the line and managing the machines.
Many plants, you described the capacity loss, or when you have to, stop the line or something, right? Because of these small compounding execution failures, with humans, being human. How do the humanoids change the economics of these kind of death by 1,000 cuts losses compared to just adding more automation or more labor, more people?
I think the first part is the adding more people is never a solution, it's never really solving the problem itself. So we really test this in many cases. We see that there are some areas that when we add more labor, this line speed improves because the human can make a solid contribution to the line. But in the cases where really addressing the small problems, small stops and everything, so just adding labor cannot bring that solution. And the automation itself, it's not a practical solution for many cases. So often you need buy a machine that requires ordering 6 months ahead, so you need to wait for it. So then you don't really have, and then when you get the machine, you don't know whether you will be able to completely remove those problems as well. So really, Humanoids here create a third option, really faster deployment, flexible coverage, and it's improved the performance over time through the learning. That may not be the right answer for every line. So if you have a line that runs the similar products like 724, of course, automation is a better investment over there. But what I see is over time, that part is decreasing. We are seeing more and more products in single lines. The lines are getting more complicated. They require more changeovers. Therefore, I think the attractiveness of big automation investments will decrease in certain areas.
Volume of just sheer reformulation, even of existing products, right? Where there may be certain banned ingredients that are having to be worked out, and so, and or just a quicker. More pressure to respond quicker to changing consumer trends, right? So we've got to get, I feel like 2025 was the year of protein, and now I think 2026 may be like the year of fiber, right? It's like, what do we need to adjust and change so that, we're responding to our consumer? And with that comes a significant amount of work, from a production perspective and what needs to be changed. So yeah, that's interesting. And so consistency in the line can be more of a kind of automation approach, but you're not seeing that. You're seeing a lot of variability and changes on the line, and different products, and there's just a lot of pressure in the industry to get to market faster too. And to make those changes. As humanoids take on more of these kind of variability heavy tasks in that, human scale environments, what new expectations should leaders set around, standard work, the rigor of sanitation, and just food safety accountability in general?
Leaders will need to raise the bar on standardization and documentation, because the current reality in many plants, the procedures exist, but the real work really lives in the people's minds. And a humanoid-driven operation can't rely on undocumented know-how. So the work has to be translated into data. The steps should be clear. The decision rules should be clear. Quality checks clear, and exception handling is clear. So we were managing this through 3 months, 6 months of training, and with many mistakes on the operations until today. But in a humanoid environment, it is very important that you document this, you standardize this as much as possible, then you really get the most benefit from a humanoid. And that's, I believe, a positive outcome from food safety standpoint. So it means that you don't need to have a separate food safety procedure that you need to follow, because it should be embedded to the entire processes that the humanoids can also follow as well. In many cases, we still find separate procedures for how to run the line and the separate procedures for the food safety. And then people look at only one of them. So they don't typically look at both of them at the same time. And I think it's a great opportunity to avoid those challenges. So you need to have one approach, one process, one environment that you translate it to data, so then it can really managed effectively by a humanoid. In the near term, of course, there are still a lot of challenges. The sanitation, allergen management with robots, is still not there. The robots aren't yet designed for full wash down everywhere. So they will be they will literally break down today. So definitely we will see a stage deployment in the food plants. But when these challenges are addressed, they will be very flexible everywhere. And then they will do whatever work that we've standardized in the floor.
For AI as well, the agent is really only as good as the training that it receives, and so the same principle, I think, applies in that the food safety directors training the humanoids and the AI, and making sure that there is that human in the loop in the process, but then the actual execution of it done precisely to the procedure. So that's great. So we've got just a couple of closing questions. This has been so interesting to talk about, how especially things that have been implemented in other industries now could be applied, as you mentioned, kind of robotics in the automotive space and other places, and now how that's coming to food. So when you look out over the next 12 months, what is your food industry prediction for the next year?
We focus on two big topics right now in value chain. One of them is the continued momentum of small and emerging brands. They are really changing the market. They are the best ones that can react on the changes on health, functionality, better for you, and they are keeping the pressure on large incumbents and really increasing demand for co-manufacturers. They are demanding flexible capacity. So they are really changing the dynamics of the industry. And we recently made a study around it. And in the next 5 years, we expect that their share will continue to increase around 4% more. So this means that we are heading there. Already started to dominate the market, but their domination will continue. I think this has impact on everywhere, on the large incumbents, on the investors. The more and more private equities are interested in the like smaller brands, and that's a really this change will continue this year, and I think will continue. We will increase. The second one is the one that you highlighted, reformulation. So I think reformulation journey is really just starting. So there is still many things to address. There are it's not one-off projects anymore. The consumer expectations are changing continuously. Tariffs are bringing new surprises every day. The complexity in the regulatory environment is increasing. Every state is bringing its own challenges. And then when you compare it with Europe, it also highlights that there is a long way to go to reach those standards. So it will not be a one-time effort anymore. So our discussions right now is more around how they should approach this reformulation with a strategic perspective, not only reactive, but also looking from a 3 to 5 year perspective when we should make the change, how we should make those changes, even before those trends hits you. That's the, I think, important part.
All right, we'll wrap up with one final question. So, constant change has been the theme of the podcast, I think. But what advice would you give to food safety and quality leaders who feel overwhelmed by constant change, but still, want to make an impact and need to, look forward, but feeling overwhelmed from this change? What advice would you give to those food safety and quality leaders?
This advice is something that I'm also trying to do. I'm not perfect every time, but this is I put effort on this. It is driving the change rather than following it, rather than reacting it. So what I always feel is, if I start to react on it, I'm already late. So there is always, I'm trying to catch up. So it's really hard to make a difference. It's really hard to be a pioneer on the topic that you are working for. That's why, for instance, we start to work on the humanoids. We know that humanoids are still years away, but it's really important to put that thinking, to start to shape the mindset, ask the right questions right now. And it's same for every food leader. So now the change is happening faster than many years. So we are seeing that the ones that really start to ask the right questions right now and start to take actions, even there are a lot of uncertainties, will be the ones most likely who win in the future.
And then we're seeing that across, I would say, almost every element of the food chain right now, that those that are leaning in to the changes, leaning into the changing regulatory environment and what is going to be required for traceability data, to being able to get technology adopted so that they can make those formulation changes quicker and get those products out to market. Those that really are leaning in are, I believe, certainly those that are going to be leading in the future. And those brands that are very resistant to change, I think that, and usually those are some of the bigger companies, and that can be, to your point earlier around this smaller, more nimble and perhaps more connected to their customer. I mean, we're seeing this very interesting, um, TikTok social media brands, right? So they're launching digitally first, as opposed to going through the more traditional retail channels, and then being able to go to a retailer and say, look at all of this direct channel sales that I have. I mean, it's just a very different. Yeah, the channels are fascinating to watch, as social media has changed that.
Exactly, exactly. And it's getting easier for the companies to take the actions as well. AI is really decreasing the costs. It's much more easy for the companies to find flexible ways to operate. So it's a really different world compared to 20 years ago, 10 years ago.
Well, Ozan, I really enjoyed our conversation. I learned, I checked the box. I try to learn something a little bit each day. And so you helped me do that today. So thank you very much for the insights and the expertise. I'm very excited to see where all of this goes, especially the introduction of the humanoids robotics on the line. I think there could be a lot of benefits from a sheer food safety perspective, but then allowing, food safety leaders to really, level up the amount of work that they're doing in a more proactive way than just being in constant reactive mode, which is very exciting.
Thank you very much for the conversation, Katy. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another bite-sized nugget of food tech talk, supply chain insights from farm to fork. Make sure to subscribe. And if you love the podcast, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about TrustWell and request your free demo of our technology platform that connects food formulation, products, nutrition analysis, and compliant labeling with traceability, recall readiness, and supply chain transparency, please visit us at www.trustwell.com and click Get Started, or click the link in the show notes to learn more. Thanks for listening.